From Deshaun Jackson, who was let go by the Eagles after photos surfaced of him supposedly making gang signs.
Yes, in a shocking move, Philadelphia Eagles has released Deshaun Jackson on Friday after alluding to the fact that it may have something to do with gang ties that he allegedly has.
To Aaron Hernandez, who reportedly had gang-related tattoos and was influenced by gang thinking.
Aaron Hernandez showing off some new ink in court this week. We first saw the convicted killer's new neck tattoo when he appeared in a Boston courtroom pleading not guilty to a new charge related to the Boston double murder.
Brandon Marshall, who was known for his arrest record.
And Brandon actually got into an altercation with the police officer. He was arrested for supposedly assaulting the officer and resisting arrest.
And even 49 ERS quarterback Richard Sherman, whose family connections made him bold enough to threaten people on record.
Don't you ever talk about me!
Who was talking about you?
Crabtree, don't you open your mouth about the best! Or I'm gonna set it for you real quick! LOB!
So when we look at why some NFL players have gang connections, it all starts with where they grew up. Many pro football players come from neighborhoods where money is tight and gangs are just part of everyday life. These communities often don't have great schools, good jobs, or much for young people to do after school.
I look at those words, gang ties, and I think about all the players I've met in the NFL and all of us who come from inner city neighborhoods like mine in LA. And I wonder how many of us could honestly say we're not friends with guys doing the wrong things.
For kids in these places, football shines like a beacon of hope, a real chance to make good money and build a better life. Interestingly, the things that make someone excel on the football field, being strong, fast, fearless, and loyal to your team, are the same qualities that gangs often value. Now, it's worth pointing out that most NFL players, even those from tough neighborhoods, don't get mixed up with gangs. But for a small number of players, those old connections or neighborhood ties can stick with them, even after they've signed those big contracts and moved into mansions. The first person on this list might surprise you, as it's a former tight end who's made a name for himself in NFL history, not just for his skills on the field, but also for his obvious gang connections. This situation runs way deeper than just a few Instagram posts or flashing gang signs. Aaron Hernandez had some serious struggles that were all too real, and they ended up ruining what could have been an amazing career and, sadly, his life. It's tough to think that anyone hasn't heard about this modern tragedy. But if you've been out of the loop for the last decade, here's a quick rundown on who Aaron Hernandez was in the NFL and how his troubled past caught up with him.
Hernandez was only paid 1 year of the now terminated $40 million contract with the New England Patriots.
Aaron Hernandez was another one of those hidden gems that Bill Belichick managed to snag for New England. He had a solid college run at the University of Florida under Urban Meyer. But as you might expect, there were some off-field issues that made teams hesitant during the draft. This led to him being picked up by the Patriots in the 4th round, 113th overall. In the 2010 NFL Draft, New England took a chance on him, and Hernandez initially paid off big time, teaming up with Rob Gronkowski to create a killer tight end duo. So much so that the team eventually gave him a $41 million contract extension. Unfortunately, it was right around that time that things started to go downhill for him.
The now terminated $40 million contract with the New England Patriots. He also has to pay a platoon of lawyers and also support his fiancée and their 2-year-old daughter.
His life was way more chaotic than anyone watching from home could have guessed. On June 18, 2013, news broke that he was being questioned in a investigation, but he wasn't considered a suspect at that point. However, things took a turn just over a week later when state police arrested the tight end. After a long legal battle, he was charged and ultimately found guilty for the murder of Odin Lloyd, a semi-pro football player who had connections to Hernandez.
When he appeared in a Boston courtroom pleading not guilty to a new charge related to the Boston double murder.
He ended up being connected to 2 other deaths in the New England area dating back to his college days. There was a lot of speculation about Hernandez's gang affiliations based on the people he hung out with and the serious charges he faced. After his death, some of his belongings found in his prison cell revealed just how entrenched gang culture was in his life.
I wish that I was told. And I wish that he would have told me, because I would not have loved him any differently. I would have understood.
Reports showed that he faced multiple disciplinary actions in prison for having what's known as STG paraphernalia, which is just a fancy way of saying he had gang-related items. Records suggest he was part of the Bloods, a gang known for wearing red and having a violent reputation. The whole Aaron Hernandez situation is tough for outsiders to wrap their heads around, especially since it seemed like he had everything going for him, but FS1's Shannon Sharpe really nailed it when he broke down the situation like this. Once you reach a certain level, once you reach a professional athlete status, a lot of guys leave that life behind. Aaron Hernandez could not. He could not. He was not a studio gangster, he was a for-real gang member, and that was a part of him. That was equally as important to him as playing in the National Football League for the New England Patriots. He had it tatted on his neck. I think he had lifetime loyalty tattooed on his neck while he was incarcerated serving the life sentence.
Aaron Hernandez showing off some new ink in court this week. We first saw the convicted killer's new neck tattoo when he appeared in a Boston courtroom pleading not guilty to a new charge related to the Boston double murder.
This is one of the wildest and saddest stories to come out of the NFL world. While the outcomes are quite different, it has some eerie similarities to the saga of a former Indianapolis Colts wide receiver. I'm talking about Marvin Harrison. He was linked to several shootings, robberies, and even an unsolved murder.
Is there any chance that somebody else could have fired those shots?
No. Marvin Harrison fired the shots.
There's no doubt in your mind.
I've seen him. I've seen him.
Although he hasn't faced any serious legal issues, his connections to gangs in West Philadelphia and shady figures like Dwight Dixon, a dealer tied to a murder case, cast a dark cloud over his Hall of Fame legacy. Shannon Sharpe mentioned how many NFL players try to distance themselves from their past, but there are plenty who come from tough backgrounds just like Aaron Hernandez and Marvin Harrison. The reality is, these guys aren't the only ones who still keep questionable company even after hitting it big. Another example is Deshaun Jackson. He was another explosive receiving option that gave defensive coordinators headaches during his peak years in Philly. Plus, he had a very public revelation about his gang connections. The rumors about Jackson's past have been floating around since his time at the University of California, Berkeley. And honestly, it's likely one of the main reasons this talented wide receiver slipped to the second round of the draft. Deshaun mostly avoided any serious off-field problems, but the rumors about him always seem to create a buzz around D-Jax in the media. To be fair, he kind of invited this attention himself by flashing gang signs, posting pics on social media, and even featuring in music videos during games. Things have started to catch up with him a bit, especially after that sketchy incident on Christmas Eve in 2017.
In a shocking move, Philadelphia Eagles has released Deshaun Jackson on Friday after alluding to the fact that it may have something to do with gang ties that he allegedly has.
A car registered to Jackson was found crashed, and it had marijuana and hollow point bullets inside. The good news is he wasn't driving when it hit a tree, and none of the stuff in the car belonged to him. But this kind of drama tends to follow someone as loyal as Jackson is to his childhood friends. I doubt many folks on his management team are thrilled about him hanging out with that crowd, but Deshaun seems pretty chill about it. To his credit, Deshaun has done a solid job of managing and changing the story over the years. In 2014, when the buzz was really ramping up, he chose to let ESPN do a feature on him to clear the air. He played it a bit coy with his comments though. He mentioned, "When I was young, I hung out with and knew certain people who were involved in certain things."
I look at those words, gang ties, and I think about all the players I've met in the NFL and all of us who come from inner city neighborhoods like mine in LA. And I wonder how many of us could honestly say we're not friends with guys doing the wrong things.
He was definitely loyal to his group of friends, even though he never actually admitted to being part of the Crips or any of the other gangs people said he was involved with. Still, it's hard to ignore how closely he was connected to them. Brandon Marshall was an amazing receiver, especially in the late 2000s, and he has some intriguing connections to gang culture. Similar to Deshaun Jackson, he seems to hover around the edges of the violent gang scene, but even that comes with its own set of serious issues. In 2014, his younger brother Bijan Massey Marshall got into some serious trouble with multiple charges, including aggravated robbery, which many thought might be linked to gang activity. Back in 2007, Marshall had a heartbreaking encounter with gang members in the Denver area when a heated argument at a nightclub turned deadly, resulting in the loss of his teammate and friend Darren Williams.
Guilty on all 21 charges. That was the verdict for a suspected gang member in the fatal drive-by shooting of Denver Broncos cornerback Darren Williams 3 years ago.
During the trial, prosecutors presented surveillance footage from outside the club where they spotted several people throwing up gang signs. Since then, Brandon has made a comeback as a vibrant TV personality and tends to steer clear of discussing that incident or his past, leaving people wondering just how deep his connections to gangs really are. Similarly, 49 ERS quarterback Richard Sherman has some family connections to gangs too.
Don't you ever talk about me!
Who was talking about you?
Crabtree, don't you open your mouth about the best! Or I'm gonna set it for you real quick! LOB!
His dad, Kevin, hung out with a tough crowd in Compton back in the day. They say he wasn't actually in a gang, but he was around them enough to get shot twice and even lost an eye in a go-karting accident. For the older Sherman, those tough times really shifted his life around. He told the LA Times that he quickly distanced himself from the streets and focused on work, which has worked out pretty well for him. Just look at how great of a role model he's been for his two sons, Richard and Branson, who both went to college and have made a name for themselves in business, not to mention their skills on the field. On top of that, Richard faced the heartbreaking loss of his childhood best friend to gang violence. Even with all these connections to gangs in Compton, there's never been any solid evidence that Richard Sherman was ever involved with them. Another player who had rumored connections to gangs was Takaris McKinley, who was raised in Richmond, California, a place known for its gang presence. He was mostly brought up by his grandmother and faced tough financial situations. He often shares how many of his childhood buddies got caught up in gangs or ended up in jail. McKinley's journey stands out because, unlike some players with direct ties to gangs, he managed to steer clear of that lifestyle even though he was surrounded by it. He often gives credit to his football coaches and his grandmother for helping him stay focused on sports instead of getting caught up in street life. McKinley isn't shy about his past like some players might be. He's opened up about how football kept him away from getting involved with gangs. "Where I'm from, you're either in a gang or you're into sports," he mentioned in an interview.
Tack McKinley, this guy was a first-round pick in 2017 at UCLA. He was a solid defensive end. His rookie season, he posted 20 tackles and 6 sacks, and was having a promising 2018 as well.
His journey highlights a hopeful side of the story, how football can be a way out of situations where joining a gang feels like the only option. McKinley's honesty about his past has really worked in his favor. When he was picked in the first round by the Atlanta Falcons in 2017, that heartfelt moment when he brought a photo of his late grandmother on stage struck a chord with fans. His genuine talk about how football kept him away from a life of gang involvement has made him more relatable and given his public image some real substance. Aqib Talib is another standout defensive back, but unlike Sherman, he's faced his share of off-field troubles. Listening to him talk about his childhood on ESPN really makes you feel for him. He grew up in tough East Cleveland, where he witnessed gangs, drugs, shootings, and fights among girls. Talib mentioned that he wasn't really shaken when his mom was in prison for 8 months on felony charges. It's clear he's shaped by a different kind of life experience.
Stick. Uh-oh. 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 Oh! Oh! Jesus!
There are also players like Adam "Pac-Man" Jones, the skilled defensive back and return specialist the Tennessee Titans had picked as 6th overall in the 2005 draft. It's important to think about the environment they come from when judging their choices. Jones had connections to gangs that were pretty much a given in his life, and those ties have definitely influenced the way things have played out for him, especially considering the 2007 shooting incident at Club Blaze in Atlanta, where he was a victim. Before the bullets hit his car, he was spotted inside the club hanging out with Edward "Slugger" Morris III and some well-known members of the International Robbing Crew, which is a local gang. This was just after Marciel Easterling, another gang member, had been chatting with investigators about him. This isn't just any run-of-the-mill gang. In the follow-up case, Fulton County DA Paul Howard Jr. told the press that law enforcement agrees this is the most violent gang anyone can recall in Atlanta. If you hang out with that crowd, you can bet trouble is on the way.
So breaking now, more trouble for a Bengals star player. We've confirmed there is now an investigation into what happened to Adam "Pac-Man" Jones.
On the other hand, there are those guys who really take those casual connections up a notch, having been officially recognized as gang members in their neighborhoods even before hitting their teenage years. One example of this is Jason Avant, who used to be a wide receiver for the Eagles. Jason Avant got into selling drugs at just 12 years old and frequently showed up to school high. As a teen, he was part of one of Chicago's gangs, the Gangster Disciples. He shared with Tulsa World that drugs, metal detectors, and gun violence were all part of his everyday life while growing up. There were dead bodies, metal detectors, drugs in lockers, all that type of stuff, Avant said. A teacher got killed and her body was found in a dumpster all cut up. A guy I played basketball with got shot.
Because Gangster Disciples on this block, Vice Lords are on this block, the BDs, the Black Disciples are on this block, the Blackstones are on this block, the Latin Kings are on 95th Street.
Avant turned his life around after discovering God in college, leaving his old life behind. That's the truth, no questions about it. For players with gang ties in their younger days, moving into professional football can be pretty tough. Gang life is all about loyalty for life, which makes it hard to cut ties. Those trying to step away from their past might deal with pressure, threats, or demands from old friends. It puts them in a tricky spot. They want to respect their backgrounds and stay connected to their communities, but they also need to build new identities as pro athletes and role models. The media has a big impact on how people view the ties between NFL players and gangs. Often, headlines blow things out of proportion, sometimes without solid proof or the full story. Certain actions by players, like unique handshakes, tattoos, or specific hand signs, can be taken the wrong way or overly examined as signs of gang involvement. This raises crucial issues about racial profiling and stereotypes. Black and Latino players especially tend to be under more intense scrutiny regarding possible gang links than white players, even when they're doing the same things. Media coverage of NFL players linked to alleged gang ties comes with a big responsibility. Careless reporting can reinforce stereotypes, harm careers over unfounded accusations, and overlook the deeper social issues involved. The best coverage digs into these topics thoughtfully, recognizing both real security concerns and the intricate social dynamics that tie some players to gang-affected neighborhoods. The NFL has rolled out several initiatives to assist players in dealing with these tricky situations. The league's player engagement department provides rookies with advice on handling past relationships, including any ties to gangs. Teams also have security staff who keep an eye on player connections and highlight any that seem problematic. Still, the league has to balance real security issues with the need to respect players' personal lives and their community ties. Some critics believe that excessive monitoring can reinforce racial stereotypes and unfairly criminalize players' histories. A lot of NFL players from neighborhoods affected by gangs are stepping up to make a real difference. Take Desmond Bishop, for example, the former linebacker for the Green Bay Packers.
If I could give my 20-year-old self advice, I would tell him to work harder and smarter.
He grew up in what he called gang territory in California and has been very open about the friends he lost to gang violence. He set up community programs aimed at giving at-risk youth better options. His journey shows how athletes can leverage their fame to tackle the issues that push young people toward gangs. Then there's Marshawn Lynch, a former NFL running back who has stayed deeply connected to his Oakland roots while working to create positive opportunities through his Fam First Family Foundation. Lynch is a great example of how players can stay engaged with tough neighborhoods and still drive positive change. The link between some NFL players and gang culture is a complicated issue that goes beyond just moral judgments. It highlights bigger problems like economic disparity, lack of opportunities, and the tough backgrounds many young men face before making it to the pros. Instead of sensationalizing these ties or using them to shame players, we should focus on understanding the underlying issues and supporting both the athletes and their communities. The most uplifting stories are those of players who overcame tough situations through football and then leveraged their success to make a positive impact back home. These narratives are worth celebrating and uplifting. As fans, it is important to play a role in fostering this positive change by moving past simplistic views, recognizing the intricate factors involved, and backing players who use their NFL fame to break the cycle of violence and create new chances for future generations. The relationship between football and gang culture isn't just a challenge to tackle. It's a glimpse into larger social issues that need our collective focus and dedication. Viewed this way, these stories transform from mere warnings into chances for real change.